Well, good afternoon. I'm James Brown, and I'm living and aging with pride. And I'm pretty excited because I've got this young man, Seth Brown, joining me. Hello there, Seth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty wonderful. You know, I've been in a tropical setting. Uh, decided I would call you from my beachfront home in Hawaii. So that's why I've got the palm trees behind me and I'm relaxing. You might see hula dancers going by any moment, but it's okay. I wanted to talk with you because you attend Georgetown and you're now here for two reasons. One, you're visiting your family, but what is it like for you as you deal with this coronavirus isolation thing to have to study and have to think still about school, but you're still imploded with all of this other information?
I think, like most things, you kind of learn how to accommodate yourself to most situations. But initially, um, I think it was difficult, and I think a lot of my peers had some difficulty um, just getting into the new routine. For me, my class in DC was at 9:30, so considering the time difference, it's 7:30 here in Utah. So that was immediately something that took a little bit of adjusting to. But I think more dramatically, the level of motivation that is required when you're working at home in your house, in your room, in many cases, in an environment that you're typically, at least in college, only in when you're on vacation. So um, it kind of is appropriate that you have this vacation scene behind you, because in a sense that's what this is for me, until I start studying every day. um, but I do think that what allowed me to make that transition somewhat successfully was the level of support that I had from my peers and my professors. We had an earthquake right the first week that I started my online classes, and my professors understood. One kid in my philosophy class emailed me and offered his support and all of that. And um, I don't think that's something that would have happened if I wasn't, you know, at home during Corona, or if he wasn't at home during Corona. Because I think um, one of the biggest things that I've recognized in people as this has gone on is that we all do generally want to look out for each other, but there's oftentimes a lot of distractions that kind of get in the way of that. But as we're here by ourselves in our homes, like, offered this opportunity to contemplate on things and reflect on a lot of things, I think we understand the humanity that kind of ties us together. And so I think I relied on that common humanity in my professors and my peers to kind of help me transition as I came home during quarantine.
So you're finding a couple of things. It's we've been attached to this high technology socialization where we could go to our iPhones or whatever it is, YouTube or wherever, and we're finding that that contact that we get from this, and it stimulates you to do better, and it's stimulating other people to get involved in that process. How has that transferred to your ability to sort of articulate your own study time, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, and that you meet the deadlines that are imposed by yourself more so than the school?
Um, this may be a little bit separate from what you're asking, but I think when you're here by yourself, a lot of, and maybe this is what you're asking, a lot of the times it is, it takes a lot of self dedication and self motivation to kind of meet the deadlines, because, which is weird because you honestly do have a lot more time. I don't have to walk from class to class. I mean, that saves me 10-15 minutes in between each class. I lived off campus. I don't have to make that 10-15 minute commute. So I'm honestly given a lot more time, but it seems like I'm more pressed for time with all of my schoolwork and stuff. Um, because I think when I was at school, I had to more consistently follow the routine that I had established, and I was going to be in the library at this time to this time, eat lunch from this time to this time. And so when you're given more time at home, I think you tell yourself that there's a little bit more flexibility that you can have. But oftentimes that flexibility kind of turns into just um, sitting around in leisure and stuff. So I think a big thing for me has been setting up routines every day, every week, kind of saying this is what I need to accomplish today, and then trying to coordinate my daily routine, so that I can meet those goals. But I'm not sure how much technology has played into that. I often find that sometimes I'll go online on my little school portal, I guess, Canvas, where all of our homework and stuff is,
Right.
look at the syllabus, and I'd sometimes be surprised to see something there. So I think that there's kind of, when you have so much technology in your face at all times outside of school, you kind of want to separate how much technology is involved with your school. So I think that my dependence on technology, as it has increased with my schoolwork, I've kind of been finding that I've been using it a little bit less outside of school to maintain a balance.
It makes you, obviously, it makes you feel better, and then plus you become more self-reliant on your own ability to discover, determine, and evaluate what it is you need to make you happy, to make you proficient in your effort to study, to live, and all of that. I mean, here you are, bam, right smack in the middle of family, where generally that's that time where you go, hey, I'm home, we're having a good time. Now you have to combine that with studying and thinking about your future. Has this in any way reshaped your thought about the direction you might want to go in, as you look toward your profession, your career, and where you see your life going?
I think that when you're given an opportunity, or not an opportunity, but we're more forced in this case to just sit with yourself and reflect on all the things that you are interested in or have been through that inform who you are as an individual. I think that inevitably you're going to find or come to some conclusion or some realization about the steps that you want to take going forward in your life. Um, I'll say two things. I had been working with this one group, G272, at Georgetown, which is the group that has been coordinating with the former slaves that were owned and sold by Georgetown,
Right.
coordinating with the descendants of those individuals, to kind of come up with some reparations package. And
Right.
aside from that, what we're now doing is trying to establish some type of video teleconference mentorship program for some of the kids of the descendants of these slaves. And so seeing how simple things like this, Zoom, and other platforms, seeing how successfully they've been utilized during this time, I mean, all the schools are doing this, has, I think, allowed me a really important perspective when I'm thinking about those type of issues with the descendants, how successful it can be. As I mentioned, I've kind of developed a deeper relationship with my professors, so that indicates to me that there is a level of connectivity that you can have online through Zoom. There is a level of vulnerability that you can still have when you're talking to someone through an iPad or through a computer.
Right.
And so I think that gives me hope as I'm working with that program going forward. Um, but other than that, going back to just the moments of self-reflection, I think um, there's a lot you can do with that self-reflection. You can focus on the parts of yourself that you may not be as proud of, or the parts that you regret, or you can focus on the parts that you are proud of, the parts that you are hopeful for. And I think that there are a lot of lessons to be learned in both of those investigations of yourself. I think one is conducive to happiness a little bit more than the other, and perhaps one is more conducive to growth than the other. But I think people nowadays during this time are engaging in both type of self-discoveries.
Right.
And I think for myself, I've kind of I've kind of transitioned um, a little bit intellectually. I'm reading a lot of new books because I have a lot of time for that. And I think those books and the narratives that you're exposed to through just reading a bunch kind of informs your own personal narrative. And so I've kind of found that I am more sure of certain parts of myself and more sure of certain steps that I want to take than I was in the past, just because of the reflection that I've been able to engage in during this time.
When you look at this adventure in terms of building reparations for slave and slave descendants, what is the connection you think? You know, it's good to know history, but sometimes history becomes a shackle, if you will, to progress. We have to take that and move it forward. What do you see those descendants doing besides the reparation? What do you see them doing? And I connect this to the Jewish dilemma of what the Jews faced during the war and all of that. This is that similar kind of thing, uh, but far more embellished in a mental attitude. What do you see the nature of the foundation for these descendants of slavery?
Well, it's interesting because the program that we're working on now with the virtual mentorship
Right,
was actually born from a discussion of the descendants had with the current reparations plan.
right,
So basically, the guy who's kind of the lead man on this program, he went to Louisiana where many of the slaves were sold, and he actually was able to speak with a woman whose name I can't remember, but she basically said that she, in general, disagreed with the concept of reparations that the Georgetown student body had voted on and agreed upon, which
right,
was that all students would pay um, a fee of $27.20, the 272 again,
right,
um, go to a fund which would be directed for, I think, educational programs for current students, directed towards programs for descendants, and a bunch of other things that I don't have enough knowledge to accurately explain. But she basically said that she thought it was unnecessary for Black students or international students who, at least with Black students, they don't necessarily contribute to the systemic racism that we're trying to address through these reparations. International students, by the nature of their family and their heritage not being involved in the history of slavery, are probably a little bit further removed from this issue. And she thought it was unnecessary for those people to be involved in pain. And she also felt that the concept of reparations itself kind of allows people to wash their hands, so to speak, of all of the guilt that they may feel surrounding the issue. And once you pay such a nominal fee like $27.20, do you now think that you have, repaired the word reparations? Do you think you've repaired all of the historical damage that's been done by, the former Georgetown institutions? And so from that, we then went to, okay, what can we do as a voluntary option for students who want to become engaged with this? What can we do to immediately impact the lives of some of these descendants? And we basically came up with a virtual mentorship program. And so we're just in the ground stages of this, the beginning stages, looking into what's feasible, looking at other programs to emulate and stuff. But I think, again, as everyone's using Zoom nowadays, we kind of see the pros and cons, the opportunities for growth, and the areas that we may want to ignore or repair a little bit. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, but basically the whole concept came out of the idea that we can't just have a one solution to solve all of those problems,
right.
because it doesn't necessarily solve them in many ways.
And in thinking, I think if we look at the economics of it all, the economics won't be spread wide enough to really make that big of a difference in the lives of the broad concept. And it's the philosophy of what slavery brought to the table. It's that repression, that attitude that continues to stay with us. Perhaps one way to think to this is to look at developing, one of the things we're learning from this coronavirus is that we have not been prepared to face it, you know, both economically, both from supplies, materials, and all of those kinds of things. Here's a chance that we can take this large body of people that still exist in America who aren't educated, who will not have an opportunity to blossom because of their lack of education. And there's millions of people out there facing that. Maybe we move those people into a zone of economic opportunity by building manufacturing issues, bringing it back from China and other places around the world where we've shipped off that manufacturing in order to make more money for the suppliers of those products. Maybe we bring that back home, and maybe this is the group of people we start to train to do those jobs so that they now have somewhat of a guaranteed foundation for economic development.
Yeah, and you bring up COVID-19 coronavirus. Obviously, we're now seeing that Black people are disproportionately affected by the disease. And I think that just speaks to the pervasive nature of, systemic racism, and how reparations is not some one objective. It's a mindset that should inform every decision that you make as far as policy, especially health,
Right.
because we see trends of, the obesity rates of Black people, heart disease, that all contributes to all this. It's contributing to the fatality rates for coronavirus, housing issues, which you know a lot about. So I think reparations, we need to view it less as a one thing that we need to do, some monetary figure that we need to reach and, collectively give towards in order to solve an issue, but it needs to be like a mindset that informs all of our policy decisions, because the issue is so pervasive. I mean, it affects probably every single thing that a Black person and a white person does. So definitely there's a lot of components to the issue, and I we've obviously poorly addressed it up until now, but I think there is hope as, people continue to see the devastating effects of racism beyond just like personal interactions. You now see it with health and coronavirus. So definitely needs to be addressed in many ways, I think.
And I think the more we face this integration of ethnicities where all kinds of people are starting to get together, the more we understand our dilemmas, the more appropriately we can face the solutions and build the solutions to change things. Because those changes, you might not think, because you're not Black, that helping a Black person do better, feel better, be better will have any impact on you, but most definitely it does. Because what we're learning through this coronavirus is that our social mentalities are at stake. We now finding more people depressed, under stress, unhappy, and that's affecting relationships, and that's affecting how we live and reside together. And if we're going to clear the space, if you will, we need to clear the space on a number of levels, because our interaction with each other is very significant to having a great country, to being a great community, and to becoming great people.
And I like how you bring up mental health, because I think I mean, it's not being ignored right now, but I think in comparison to the other issues, which are so severe, our own mental health, the mental health of the Black community, but also society writ large, has somewhat been ignored up until this point. And it has taken something so dramatically impactful and life-changing as coronavirus for people to seriously stop and think, oh, what am I feeling right now? How does my environment affect my mental health? And I think it goes back to so many different things. You can talk about work ethic, what is motivating us to participate in society. I think that has a lot to do with our mental health, but specifically the Black community's mental health is kind of in peril right now. And I had just finished up work doing research on this particular intervention strategy for Black youth called Celebrating the Strengths of Black Youth. And it's a psychological intervention program. It focused on middle-class Black families, which I think is important because they're oftentimes ignored. But I suggested that this intervention should be carried over to low-income Black families. But what it was group activities with children and their parents. And it focused on improving the self-esteem of Black youth and also the racial identity of Black youth. And it also focused on promoting parents' racial socialization practices, which is, all of the media and all of the images and narratives that inform a person's concept of their own race. So it looked to improve egalitarian messaging, as far as like all human beings are equal. Like we gotta have Black pride, but we also gotta remember that we're all human beings, and that is again something that coronavirus is highlighting. But it also talked about preparation for bias, cultural pride, things like that, and trying to promote that in the child and also in the parent. And what we saw is that the intervention actually had pretty serious impacts on child's a Black youth's self-esteem, and then
Right.
on parents' messages of racial egalitarianism. And this is so important to me because in my work with this group called Project Focus, we work with a charter school in DC, St. Paul Charter School. And we went in there in February, Black History Month, and one of my colleagues, they stood at the front of the room and they asked the kids, why do we celebrate Black History Month? And you can probably guess the answers they came up with: slavery, because Martin Luther King was killed, because they lynched people, because our human rights are denied at this time, at this time, at this time. And as we got in our group sessions, I sat down with these kids and I said, I think it's really sad that we can't come up with one positive reason why we should be proud of being Black. And I said, can you all come up with something? And they just stared at me blankly. And that's the problem that we're facing is
Exactly.
we're we're developing these kids in an environment where they have no sense of pride or resilience in their own Blackness, but then they're told at every moment of the day that they are Black. And then you're telling them that they shouldn't be proud of that. So what we had these kids do, we had them write, spoken word or rap about how they were proud of being Black. And that all is about mental health. And people don't understand. They think mental health exists in some ivory tower that's so separate from daily life. But when you realize that your emotional well-being, your social emotional learning affects your academic success, affects whether or not a teacher thinks that you can succeed, and thus affects how you view your own ability to succeed, you really see that mental health is kind of the foundation for all of the things that we want these young Black kids to aspire towards. We want them to become doctors, we want them to become president, but we don't want them to be happy and confident with themselves. And what can we do in the classroom, outside of the classroom, thinking about the racial socialization messages, thinking about the stuff that we see on TV and in movies? What can we do to affect that, to more positively affect their own conception of their own race and their racial identity? So I
Without a
think
doubt.
mental health is a huge thing, yeah.
Without a doubt, the self-esteem has got to be the foundation. We have to get out of labeling individuals black, white, green, or blue. We've got to get into the self esteem and the ability to recognize as a human being, you are gifted with being able to do a whole lot of different things. And the way that gift comes into materialization is that you learn things, you understand things, you experience things, and all of those things tend to build the character that you can be. February should not be just a month because Martin Luther King was shot or Malcolm X died. It should be the realization that as a human being, I can contribute to my self-worth, and my self-worth is a contribution to this society. And that's what makes it a great society.
I agree. And I think a lot of the issues that we have today is that it's such an individualistic culture. And we're really only focused on ourselves in many ways. The goal for everybody seems to be, let me go out and make money, and that's important. We got to support ourselves. But that individualistic culture often forces us to ignore that there are other people out there that we are meant to support, other people that we live amongst and live alongside. And like, we got to support those people. We need to invest in humanistic values, values of community. And these
Exactly.
values are things that are already strong in the Black community: kinship, community. The church is a huge part of Black culture, but we're kind of moving away from it. And this is not to say that we need to reinvest in religious concepts, because I think we've been led astray, reading the Bible of the white man for so long. But I think that we need to kind of, reinvest in those aspects of our culture that are kind of already strong, the community values, looking out for each other. Because if it was less about my individual drive and commitment to make money and more so about me supporting the community that raised me, then maybe we would have a broader perspective and be able to put our own issues and our own, struggles in perspective and be able to, help a brother out, so to speak. But I really do think that that individualistic culture that's kind of so strong right now is kind of preventing us from loving each other, and especially in the Black community, we're kind of we're so far from loving each other, it seems, and especially between men and women. I think that brings up a conversation about sexism that is probably a whole separate one. But I think if we can just root ourselves, and this goes beyond color and race, if we can just root ourselves in love for others, and love for ourselves, then we will be able to kind of, really create a society that is going to collectively bring everybody up.
I love it. I love it. Last question. I think from my experience with you is that I'm sensing that there's a whole new discovery taking place within your mind, within your heart, within your spirit, and all of those things have to interact in order for you to be the better person. Uh, am I correct in seeing that you've discovered this whole other person? Well, it wasn't another person, but that person within inside of you that can reach beyond your horizon, if you will, and be great at it?
I think recently I have discovered or rediscovered that love, as I mentioned, can reorient you if you let it. And I see love as not just some fictitious word, but I see love as meaning care, respect, understanding, and knowledge. And you got to do all of those things to yourself before you can do it for another person. You can't tie someone else's shoe unless you know how to tie your own. And so I've been grounded and reoriented in this love, an authentic type of self-love, which doesn't delude myself from the problems or improvements that I need to make, but loves myself in spite of those things and works towards, a version of myself that can address those. And then orienting that love, once it's within my own heart, outwards to the people in my community, in my family, in my house, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what I have been afforded through this quarantine is an opportunity to really go as deep as you possibly can. And I think if you really uncover everything at the core, you will find love or a lack of love. And what you do with that discovery is going to dramatically impact how you engage the world and ultimately the impact that you think you can make on the world.
Hey, I love it. I'm James Brown, and this is Seth Brown, and we've been talking about what this coronavirus and the societal impact of all of this, his growth, and how he reflects on today's social environment. Thank you, Seth, for spending this time with me. You amaze me and continue to enlighten my soul with your knowledge and wisdom for such a young and healthy man. God bless you and much success.
Thank you for having me on. I clearly got a lot to talk about, so hopefully you'll have me back.
Oh, regularly. I would love to talk with you on more things, and I'd like the fact that we didn't prepare, we just threw it out there, and you can expound on those things. So let's do it again and again and again, okay?
All right.
All right, God bless you, and I'll talk to you soon, all right?